Welcome to Story-Driven English, where learning English isn't just about grammar and vocab, it's about diving into captivating tales that stick with you. I'm TNBN, New C, your guide to mastering English through the power of storytelling. Whether you're sipping coffee with Linda in a small-town shop or unraveling global adventures, we're here to make your language journey fun, fluent, and unforgettable. So grab a seat and let's get started. Today, we're jumping into a wild ride, Trump's 2025 reciprocal tariff adventure. Imagine a world where tariffs spark chaos, coffee prices soar, and nations play a high-stakes game of you tax me, I tax you. What if one signature could tip the global economy into a tailspin or brew a storm in your morning cup? Stick around as we unravel this tale of trade, tension, and a little humor, plus pick up some English to impress your friends. You won't believe how this ends. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. A Tale of Tariffs. Trump's 2025 reciprocal trade adventure was a chilly morning on February 13, 2025, when President Donald Trump, with his signature flair for the dramatic, sat down in the Oval Office and signed a presidential memorandum that would send ripples or perhaps full-on waves through the world of international trade. The reciprocal tariff policy was born, a plan so straightforward yet bold it could have been scribbled on a napkin. If another country slaps a tax on American goods, the U.S. would mirror it right back. Fair's fair, Trump likely muttered, imagining a world where trade balances out like a perfectly leveled seesaw. And so began a story of tariffs, tantrums, and a touch of global chaos, all wrapped in a light dusting of humor. The idea was simple enough. Picture this. Country X charges a 20% tariff on American-made cowboy boots heading their way. Under Trump's new policy, the U.S. would say, fine, then your fancy imported cheeses are getting a 20% tariff too. It's like a playground rule, don't take my lunch money unless you're ready to lose yours. The goal? To level the playing field so American exporters wouldn't be stuck hobbling around foreign markets with one boot taxed off. Trump, ever. The showman pitched it as a grand return to fairness, a way to stick it to nations he'd long accused of taking advantage of America's open-door trade policies. But as with any good story, the plot thickened fast. Economists and everyday shoppers alike started scratching their heads. Sure, it sounded noble, but what about the fallout? Higher tariffs on imports could mean pricier gadgets, clothes, and heaven forbid avocados at the grocery store. Imagine little Timmy begging for the latest gaming console, only for mom to sigh, sorry, kiddo, tariffs jacked up the price, blame Uncle Sam and his trade mirror. Businesses weren't thrilled either. Companies relying on cheap imported steel or tech components saw their costs creeping up, threatening profit margins and sparking whispers of layoffs. It was less America first and more Americas. Wallets last for some across the globe. The reaction was swift and loud. Trading partners like Canada, the EU, and China didn't exactly send thank you notes. Retaliation became the word of the day, with threats of counter-tariffs flying faster than you can say. Trade war, picture a diplomatic standoff, where everyone's holding a tariff gun, waiting to see who blinks first. Canada might tax American maple syrup, yes, we export some too, while the EU could slap a fee on Harley-Davidsons. Suddenly, the world felt like a giant game of economic Jenga, with each move risking a bigger collapse. Trump, unfazed, probably grinned and said, "Let's see who's got the better poker face." This wasn't the first time America had flirted with reciprocal tariffs, mind you. History buffs might recall the 1930s, when the U.S. used similar tactics to nudge countries into lowering trade barriers through negotiation. But Trump's 2025 version felt different, less about sweet talking and more about strong arming. Back then, it was a diplomatic dance. Now it was a full-on arm wrestling match. The announcement's early timing, just 6 weeks into the year, hinted that trade was Trump's top priority, a shiny new toy he couldn't wait to play with. Of course, pulling this off was no walk in the park. Imagine the poor bureaucrats tasked with tracking tariffs across hundreds of countries and thousands of products. One day, it's matching a 15% tax on German cars. The next, it's figuring out what to do about Vietnamese flip-flops. It'd take a spreadsheet the size of Texas and a caffeine budget to match. Compliance would be a nightmare too, businesses scrambling to keep up, customs agents buried in paperwork, and probably a few accidental tax mismatches sparking many international incidents. Oops, we overtaxed your wine by to our bad. Doesn't exactly smooth over tensions. As the policy rolled out, the world watched with bated breath. In a small American town, a coffee shop owner named Linda swapped out imported beans for a local roast, muttering, "Thanks, Trump, now my lattes taste like patriotism." Meanwhile, in Beijing, a factory boss grumbled over new U.S. tariffs on his widgets, plotting his next move. The story was just beginning, and whether it'd end in triumph, turmoil, or a tariff-induced truce, no one could say. One thing was clear: Trump's reciprocal trade adventure was a wild ride, and the globe was along for it, whether they liked it or not. Chapter 2, Details of the Reciprocal Tariff Policy Notification, February 13, 2025. The ink was barely dry on President Donald Trump's February 13, 2025 Memorandum, Trade, and Reciprocal Tariffs, a title snappy enough to sound like a buddy cop movie when the gears of his grand plan started grinding. Picture Trump, pen in hand, leaning back in his chair with a grin, saying, "Let's make trade fair again. Folks, tit for tat, dollar for dollar." This wasn't just about tariffs anymore. It was a full-on crusade against anything he deemed unfair, from sneaky value-added taxes, VAT, to wonky exchange rates and whatever else he could pin on the global trade bulletin board. The story of his reciprocal tariff adventure was about to get a lot juicier. The memorandum wasn't messing around. It laid out a directive so broad, it could have doubled as a net to catch every trade grievance Trump had ever tweeted about. Tariffs? Check. VAT policies that quietly jacked up prices on American goods? Check. Exchange rates that made U.S. exports feel like they were swimming upstream? Double check. And then there were the mysterious, other unfair practices, a catch-all. Phrase vague enough to keep trade lawyers guessing for months. Trump tapped the U.S. Trade Representative USTR and the Commerce Department to dig into every lopsided deal America had with its partners, tasking them with sniffing out anything harmful and cooking up a fix-it plan. It was like sending a pair of bloodhounds after a buffet of trade imbalances. The deadline was set, April 1st, 2025, no fooling around, despite the date. By then, these agencies had to deliver a report so detailed that it'd make a tax accountant blush, with implementation potentially kicking off the very next day, April 2nd. Trump dubbed it the Fair and Reciprocal Plan, a name so wholesome it sounded like a community potluck, except instead of casseroles, nations were swapping tariffs. The goal? To iron out the wrinkles in international trade and make sure America wasn't the one stuck holding the short end of the stick alongside. The memorandum came a handy little briefing note, like a cheat sheet for anyone confused about what unfair meant in Trump's world. It listed examples that read like a grocery list of gripes. Brazil's hefty tariffs on American ethanol, because apparently their biofuels didn't need the competition. India's steep taxes on U.S. motorcycles, which probably irked Trump every time he pictured a Harley stuck at customs. The EU's restrictions on American shellfish, leaving lobsters and clams twiddling their claws at the border. Oh, and don't forget the EU's car tariffs or the digital service taxes from Canada and France, which had big tech sweating bullets. It was a smorgasbord of trade beefs, and Trump was ready to serve up some reciprocal justice back in our small American town. Coffee shop owner Linda caught wind of this latest chapter. Great, she groaned, eyeing her espresso machine. First the beans, now maybe the parts for this thing. Trump's turning my shop into a tariff survival story across the ocean. A Brazilian ethanol farmer chuckled darkly. Guess we'll see who blinks first. Hope they like expensive gas. Meanwhile, an Indian motorcycle dealer shrugged, muttering, more tariffs. Fine, I'll just sell more scooters. Harleys are overrated anyway. The global Jenga game was stacking higher, with each country poking at the tower, waiting for the inevitable wobble. As April loomed, the USTR and Commerce folks burned the midnight oil, poring over trade data like detectives on a deadline. Somewhere in Washington, an intern probably misspelled VAT as vet and sparked a brief panic about taxing veterinarians. Trump, ever the maestro, likely watched it all unfold with a gleam in his eye, ready to flip the switch on April 2nd and see his fair and reciprocal plan light up the world, or at least shake it up. The story was far from over, and with every new tariff threat, it promised more twists, a few laughs, and maybe a little chaos. After all, in Trump's trade tale, the only rule was that there were no rules except the one about mirroring every move. Chapter 3, Understanding Reciprocal Tariffs. The world buzzed with talk of Trump's shiny new reciprocal tariff policy. It was time to crack open the dictionary, or at least the trade handbook, to figure out what reciprocal really meant in this wild saga. At its heart, a reciprocal tariff is like a cosmic game of you tax me, I tax you. If country A slaps a 10% tariff on your apples, you dust off your tariff wand and zap their oranges with a 10% fee right back. The aim? To keep trade balanced, like a seesaw that doesn't leave one kid stuck in the air. Historically, it's been less about revenge and more about nudging everyone toward lower tariffs or, failing that, matching the high ones to level the sandbox. In Trump's tale, though, this old-school tool was getting a flashy remix. Now, don't confuse reciprocal tariffs with their rowdier cousin, retaliatory tariffs. Those are the ones governments whip out when they're mad, like when someone's caught dumping cheap steel or handing out shady subsidies. Retaliatory tariffs are a slap on the wrist. Reciprocal ones are more like a polite but firm, let's even this up. Trump's plan leaned hard into the latter, aiming to mirror whatever taxes, VATs, or exchange rate tricks other nations threw at American goods. It was less, how dare you, and more, oh, you want to play that game? Watch this, the beauty of reciprocal tariffs, at least in theory, is their bargaining power. Imagine the U.S. hiking tariffs on French wine to match France's taxes on American bourbon. Suddenly, French winemakers are sipping their Pinot with a frown, nudging their government to cut a deal. Lower your bourbon tax, and we'll all be happier, they'd grumble. It's a chess move designed to nudge everyone toward a freer, friendlier trade world, or at least one where the tariffs aren't quite so lopsided. Trump, ever the deal maker, probably saw it as a golden ticket to flex some muscle without firing the first shot. Back home, the ripple effects were already stirring. For local industries, reciprocal tariffs could be a superhero cape. Picture an American shoemaker suddenly competitive again because imported sneakers got pricier. Tariffs to the rescue. But there's a catch. Too much protection can make businesses lazy. Why innovate when you're safe behind a tariff wall? Meanwhile, regular folks like Linda, our coffee shop hero, weren't exactly cheering. First my beans, now my cups. She sighed, picturing a tariff-driven price hike on imported mugs. Guess I'll charge extra for a patriotic pour thanks, Don. Higher costs for imported goodies could mean tighter wallets all around. And nobody loves that plot twist. Here's where the story gets tricky. Reciprocal sounds fair, like two pals splitting a pizza. But Trump's version had a unilateral twist. By having the U.S. decide what counted as unfair, VAT, digital taxes, bad vibes, it felt less like a mutual handshake and more like America pointing a finger and saying, match me or else. Traditionally, reciprocity in trade meant both sides agreeing to lower barriers together. Think of it as a global pinky promise. Trump, though, was redefining it as mirroring whatever barriers existed, even tossing in fiscal policies like taxes into the mix. To some, it smelled like protectionism with a fancy new label, and the international crowd wasn't buying it. Reciprocal. Huh? An EU diplomat might have quipped over espresso. More like, do it our way or pay up. As April 1st ticked closer, the USTR and Commerce teams scrambled to map out this brave new tariff world. Somewhere, a trade analyst probably muttered, if I have to calculate one more VAT offset, I'm switching to decaf across the globe. Nations eyed their own tariff playbooks, wondering if Trump's mirror game would spark a trade truce or a full-on tariff tango. For now, the story rolled on, with Linda pouring slightly pricier lattes, Indian bikers revving tariff-free scooters, and Trump grinning like a man who'd just rewritten the rules. Fair or not, His reciprocal adventure was keeping everyone on their toes and maybe reaching for their wallets. Chapter 3: Reasons and Objectives Behind the Policy. Behind the curtain of Trump's tariff tango lay a simple, oft-repeated conviction. America had been getting the short end of the trade stick for decades. Picture Trump, arms crossed, staring at a map of the world like a disappointed dad, muttering, "Everyone's taxing us more than we tax them unfair." In his mind, the U.S. had been playing the nice guy with low tariffs while other countries built walls of FEs around their markets, leaving American goods knocking on locked doors. This imbalance, he argued, was the big bad wolf behind the nation's gaping trade deficit, a yawning gap between what America sold and what it bought that kept economists up at night. For Trump, it wasn't just numbers. It was a personal mission. To right a cosmic wrong, enter the fair and reciprocal plan, the crown jewel of his 2025 policy. The goal? Slash that pesky goods trade deficit and iron out every wrinkle of unfairness in America's global dealings. The plan was like a tailor-made suit. Measure every foreign tariff, VAT, or sneaky trade trick, then stitch together a matching U.S. tariff to fit. If Brazil taxed American ethanol, the U.S. would tax Brazilian oranges. If India hit Harley-Davidsons, Indian spices would feel the burn. It was a tit-for-tat masterpiece designed to make trade a two-way street, or at least scare other nations into lowering their own barriers before the tariff hammer dropped. But fairness wasn't the only prize Trump had his eye on. He wanted a level playing field where American workers and businesses could strut their stuff without tripping over foreign FEs. The logic was simple. If the U.S. mirrored high tariffs, other countries might blink first, cutting their own taxes on American goods to dodge the reciprocal smackdown. See, Trump might have grinned, imagining a French diplomat nervously uncorking a tariff-free bottle of U.S. bourbon. They'll play nice when they see we mean business. It was a high-stakes game of chicken, with global trade as the racetrack. There was a bonus perk too: cold, hard cash. Higher tariffs could fatten the U.S. Treasury's piggy bank, a windfall Trump could use to plug budget holes or fund his next big idea, maybe a gold-plated America First monument, who knows. More seriously, it tied into his broader America First playbook, where every policy was a love letter to domestic manufacturing and national security. By nudging production back home, think factories humming with new jobs, Trump saw a stronger, shinier industrial backbone for the country. Made in the USA wasn't just a slogan. It was the dream fueling this tariff tale. Of course, not everyone was clapping. Critics pointed out a glaring plot hole. Trump's laser focus on the goods deficit ignored America's services trade surplus, a hefty chunk of cash from things like tech, finance, and tourism that softened the goods gap. It was like obsessing over a leaky faucet while ignoring the gushing well out back. A fuller picture of trade, goods, and services might have painted a less dire scene. But Trump wasn't here for nuance. Goods are what you can touch, he might have said, waving off the eggheads. That's what counts. Back in our small-town saga, Linda the coffee shop owner felt the stakes firsthand. Fairness, huh? She mused, stirring a pot of local brew. Hope it's fair when my imported sugar doubles in price across the globe. An Indian spice trader shrugged. If they tax my turmeric, I'll just sell to China America's loss. The USTR team, meanwhile, hunched over calculators, muttering goods, services. Who's got time for both? As April 1st loomed, Trump's tariff adventure rolled on. A mix of noble intent, bold bets, and a few blind spots. Whether it'd shrink deficits, spark jobs, or just jack up prices, one thing was clear. This story was all about rewriting the rules Trump style. Chapter 4, Potential Economic Impact on the U.S. economy, as Trump's tariff tail marched. Toward its April showdown, the economic crystal ball started flashing warning lights. The reciprocal tariff policy wasn't just a trade tweak, it was a potential economic earthquake, and the U.S. was standing right on the fault line. For everyday Americans, the first tremor might hit their wallets. Higher tariffs on imports could turn a $50 gadget into a $60 splurge, a $20 shirt into a $25 fashion statement, and Lord help us, a $5 latte into a $6 luxury Linda might have to rename tariff tonic. Businesses importing parts or goods would feel the pinch too, passing those extra costs to shoppers like a hot potato nobody wanted to hold. The eggheads at J.P. Morgan and Yale Budget Lab weren't exactly throwing a parade either. They crunched the numbers and saw storm clouds over GDP growth. Picture this. Imports drop as tariffs bite. Other countries fire back with their own FEs. And suddenly, U.S. exports like soybeans or pickup trucks start gathering dust. The result? A sluggish economy, with growth stalling like a car running out of gas. J.P. Morgan's Nora Shentivani warned that if Trump's plan went full throttle matching tariffs, VATs, and digital taxes, the average U.S. tariff could skyrocket by 12 points to over 20%. Yale's crew chimed in, pegging effective tariffs at their highest since 1937, with prices jumping 1.7% to 2.1%. For the average family, that's $2,700 to $3,400 vanishing from their bank accounts in 2024 alone, enough to make anyone choke on their morning coffee. Industries were in for a wild ride too. Farmers, already jittery about foreign markets, might see retaliatory tariffs slam the door on their wheat or pork exports. Great, a Kansas grower might groan. Now I've got a barn full of pigs and nowhere to send them. The auto industry, tangled in global supply chains, could face pricier imported parts, jacking up car prices just when you thought that new SUV was in reach. Manufacturers relying on foreign steel or chips. Higher costs, slimmer profits, and a competitive edge dulled like a butter knife. And jobs? The rosy America First promise hit a snag. Retaliation could axe export-driven gigs, while import-dependent firms might trim payrolls to survive the tariff squeeze. The bigger picture wasn't pretty either. J.P. Morgan whispered about a significantly higher risk of a global recession, with trade uncertainty spooking businesses into hunker-down mode. Yale's crystal ball showed GDP growth limping 0.6 to 1.0 points lower in 2025, and the economy shrinking 0.3% to 0.6% long-term, Think $100 to $175 billion shaved off annually by 2024. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck with Trump at the controls, grinning. Fairness is worth it, folks. Back in our small town, Linda adjusted her price board with a sigh. Tariff tonic is $6 a cup. Blame the trade gods. A nearby farmer grumbled over his unsold soybeans, muttering, fairness? Tell that to my empty silo across the ocean. A German carmaker smirked. Higher U.S. tariffs? Fine, we'll sell more BMWs. In Asia, the tariff Jenga tower wobbled as April neared, with economists clutching their calculators and families clutching their budgets. Trump's adventure was proving one thing. Fairness might come with a hefty price tag and a few extra bucks for that latte. B. Impact on trading partners. As Trump's tariff train chugged along, the tracks didn't stop at the U.S. border. They stretched across oceans and continents, rattling the cages of America's trading partners. With the reciprocal tariff policy cranking up U.S. import taxes to match theirs, foreign exporters were staring down a grim reality. Their goods were about to get pricier for American buyers. A Japanese electronics maker might grimace, my TVs just went from budget-friendly to maybe next year for U.S. shoppers. Sales could slump, market share could shrink, and suddenly the U.S., that big, shiny consumer market, felt a little less welcoming, but these partners weren't about to roll over and play dead. Oh no, the word retaliation started bouncing around like a ping-pong ball in a windstorm. If Trump wanted to mirror their tariffs, they'd mirror right back, sparking a trade war that could make a bar brawl look tame. Canada might tax American apples. The EU could slap fees on U.S. jeans. And China might eye those Boeing planes with a sly, not so fast, U.S. industries like agriculture and manufacturing, hooked on export dollars, could take a beating. First my corn, now my tractors. An Iowa farmer might lament, watching his overseas buyers vanish like mirages in a drought. Global companies, ever the crafty foxes, weren't waiting for the tariff axe to fall. They started sketching new maps for their supply chains, dodging Trump's tariffs like kids avoiding chores. Why import from a tariff-hit country when you could source from a friendlier one? A French wine exporter might pivot to Chilean grapes, while a Korean car parts supplier could shift production to Thailand. Some might even pack up entirely, setting up shop in a tariff-free zone and waving goodbye to old trade TIs. It'd be a logistical shuffle that'd leave global supply chains tangled and less efficient, like a game of Twister played with cargo ships. See ya, old roots. A supply chain manager might quip. Time for Plan B. The numbers painted a stark picture, courtesy of Yale and J.P. Morgan. U.S. consumers faced $2,700 to $3,400 in losses per household. GDP growth could limp 0.6 to 1.0 points lower by 2025, and tariffs might climb past 20% across the border. A Canadian lumber mill owner grumbled, less U.S. business. I'll sell to Japan, hope they like pine. An Indian textile boss shrugged, American tariffs? No problem. Europe loves my cotton. The retaliation threat loomed large. with U.S. farmers and factory workers bracing for the fallout. Linda, pouring her now sixth tariff tonic, caught the international vibe. They're mad. We're mad. Guess who's stuck with the bill? As the April 2nd deadline loomed, Trump's tariff tale turned into a global soap opera. Would trading partners cave and cut their tariffs or double down? With a retaliatory punch? Would supply chains snap or stretch? One thing was clear. The economic shockwaves weren't just America's problem, they were everyone's. The Jenga tower wobbled, and with every move, the world held its breath, wondering if Trump's fairness fight would unite the globe in trade harmony or just leave it picking up the pieces. Chapter 5, International Response and Responsia. Reaction from major trading partners. When Trump dropped his reciprocal tariff bombshell on February 13, 2025, the world didn't exactly send him a fruit basket. America's trading partners, caught in the tariff spotlight, reacted like a cast of characters in a global drama, some with fiery defiance, others with cautious sidesteps. The international stage lit up with grumbles, threats, and a few diplomatic curveballs, turning Trump's fairness quest into a full-on geopolitical soap opera. China, already knee-deep in a trade spat with the U.S. from earlier in 2025, didn't blink. They'd been slugging it out with tariffs on American coal, LNG, oil, and farm machinery, and Trump's latest move was just another round in the ring. Bring it on, a Beijing official might have smirked, polishing their retaliatory playbook. Meanwhile, Canada and Mexico, America's North American neighbors, weren't feeling the love either. Both had been stung by U.S. tariffs earlier in the year, and this reciprocal twist was salt in the wound. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the auto tariffs a direct attack, vowing to shield Canadian workers like a hockey goalie guarding the net. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum, shaking her head, insisted, "Our trade deal says no tariffs. Let's stick to the script." Both hinted at retaliation, though the Uzmka threw a wrench in the timing, leaving them plotting their next move. Over in Europe, the EU wasn't mincing words. Ursula von der Leyen, the bloc's big boss, sighed like a disappointed parent, calling taxes bad for business, worse for consumers on both sides. The EU waved a warning flag. Hit us with car tariffs, and we'll smack your digital services right back. It was a transatlantic standoff, with Brussels ready to play hardball to protect its own. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, ever the cool-headed strategist, kept it vague but firm. "We'll take appropriate measures," he said, eyeing U.S. tariffs on Japanese autos like a samurai sizing up an opponent. India, singled out by Trump for its sky-high motorcycle tariffs, got a plot twist. While Trump wagged a finger at New Delhi, the two sides shook hands on a fall 2025 trade talk kickoff, less a showdown, more a let's chat over chai. Australia and Brazil, still smarting from earlier U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs, held off on immediate counterpunches but loomed as potential reciprocal targets. "We're watching," a Brazilian official might have muttered, sipping coffee and weighing options. Back in our small-town saga, Linda caught the global buzz on the radio. "China's mad. Canada's mad. Europe's mad. Guess I'm not the only one grumpy about prices," she quipped, wiping down her counter. A Kansas farmer listening too groaned, "More retaliation? My wheat's toast across the seas." A German car exec shrugged. "U.S. tariffs? Fine. Asia's calling." The tariff Jenga tower swayed as each nation flexed its muscles, some roaring, others scheming. Trump's adventure was now worldwide whodunit. Would they talk? Tax or tangle? One thing was clear. The international cast wasn't bowing out quietly, and the next act promised fireworks. B. Response from trade organizations and industry. As Trump's tariff tail rippled outward, it wasn't just nations clutching their trade playbooks. Industry bigwigs and global organizations were chiming in too, and they weren't exactly humming a happy tune. The reciprocal tariff policy had them fretting over a Pandora's box of problems: supply chain snarls, a potential trade war blowout, and a pricier, less predictable world for everyone. It was like Trump had tossed a wrench into the gears of global commerce, and the mechanics weren't thrilled. Trade groups and economists sounded the alarm loud and clear. Higher prices, supply chaos, and a trade war free for all. No thanks, they grumbled, picturing a world where consumers paid more for less. The auto industry, in particular, was sweating bullets. Higher tariffs on parts could jack up costs, tank sales, and leave showrooms quieter than a library on Sunday. Great, a Detroit exec might have muttered. Now my sedans cost more and nobody's buying. Others worried about variety taking a hit. Imagine American shelves with fewer gadgets or jeans, leaving shoppers sighing, same old, same old. It was a chorus of concern, with the global supply chain looking like a tangled ball of yarn after a kitten got to it. Back in our small-town saga, Linda caught wind of the industry buzz while flipping through a trade mag at her coffee shop. Disrupted supply chains? She snorted, eyeing her espresso machine. If this thing breaks and parts cost a fortune, I'm switching to instant tariffs, be damned, across the globe. A German carmaker nodded grimly. Higher U.S. costs. Guess we'll push SUVs in China instead. The numbers backed up the unease. Yale's 27003 400 household hit. JP Morgan's 20% tariff spike warning. It all painted a picture of a world bracing for impact. The international reaction table told the story in black and white. China was already swinging with retaliatory tariffs on U.S. coal and oil. Canada and Mexico, spitting mad, threatened counterpunches while clinging to Azunka fine print. The EU waved a red flag, ready to tax U.S. tech if cars got hit. India played it cool with trade talks while Japan, Australia, and Brazil eyed their options, muttering about steel and autos. Everywhere, trade groups wrung their hands, visions of a snarled, costly future dancing in their heads. As April 2nd loomed, Trump's tariff adventure felt like a high-stakes poker game. Nations, industries, and everyday folks all holding their cards, waiting to see who'd fold or go all in. Linda, pouring her overpriced brew, summed it up with a wry grin. Trade war, supply mess, higher prices. Sounds like everyone's losing, but at least my coffee's still hot. The world watched, wallets in hand, as Trump's fairness fight stirred a pot that might just boil over. Chapter 6, Historical Perspective on Reciprocal Tariffs in the United States. understand Trump's tariff tango, let's hop in the time machine and zip back through America's checkered trade past. Once upon a time, think early 1800s to mid-1900s, the U.S. was the poster child for protectionism, wrapping its industries in a cozy tariff blanket. From 1861 to 1933, America's import taxes on manufactured goods were among the world's highest, like a keep-out sign for foreign widgets. But after 1942, the mood shifted. Uncle Sam swapped the fortress for a handshake, championing free trade to stitch the globe back together post-war. The idea of reciprocal tariffs wasn't new, even back in the 1800s. Picture a world where everyone's guarding their markets with high tariffs, like medieval lords hoarding gold. It sparked a light bulb. Why not balance the scales? Fast forward to 1934, smack in the Great Depression, and the U.S. rolled out the Reciprocal Tariff Act. This gem let the president slash tariffs if other countries played ball, aiming to jumpstart trade and drag the economy out of the muck. Before that, Congress hogged the tariff reins, turning trade policy into a slow, political slugfest. The 1934 law was a game-changer: quicker moves, fairer deals, and a pivot from "lock the gates" to "let's talk." Tariffs dropped from a hefty 46% average in 1934 to a breezy 12% by 1962, paving the way for global pacts like GATT that kept trade humming, and the 1930s economic scars fading. Historically, reciprocal tariffs were about lowering barriers through chit-chat, not raising them to match the neighbors. The 1934 playbook was all about liberalization. Think of it as a friendly, you lower yours, I'll lower mine dance. Contrast that with Trump's 2025 remix, where fairness meant mirroring whatever tariffs others threw up. No negotiation required. It's like the difference between trading baseball cards and building a wall. Same term, wildly different vibes. The 1934 Act healed a depression-ravaged world. Trump's 2025 move eyed a trade deficit with a protective squint. There was a flicker of this tougher vibe in 2019, when a proposed Reciprocal Trade Act floated the idea of tariffs as a hardball tactic to bully others into cutting their rates. It didn't pass, but it planted a seed Trump clearly nurtured. Back in our tale, Linda, flipping through a history book between coffee pours, chuckled. So, tariffs used to mean, let's all get along, huh? Now it's match me or bust, a farmer nearby nodded. Yeah, 1934 was about recovery 2025. He's just Trump flexing. As April 2nd, 2025, loomed, the ghosts of tariff past whispered a warning. Reciprocal could mean harmony or havoc, depending on the tune. Trump's version, less chat, more tit for tat, felt like a throwback to the protectionist old days, just with shinier packaging. The world watched, wondering if history would rhyme with cooperation or clang with conflict. Either way, Linda's $6 tariff tonic was a modern twist on an old story, and it still tasted like trouble. Chapter 7. Policy in the context of current U.S. trade relations. Early 2025. The U.S. trade scene was already a simmering pot of tension, and Trump's reciprocal tariff policy was the ladle stirring it up. Picture the landscape. Ongoing spats with China, Canada, and Mexico had tempers flaring, with U.S. tariffs already pinching steel, aluminum, and assorted goods from these neighbors. The air was thick with trade grudges when Trump signed his memorandum. On February 13th, tossing a match into an already smoldering pile of disputes, the numbers told a stark story. January 2025 saw the U.S. goods trade deficit balloon to $156.8 billion, a hefty jump from the year before. China led the pack at $29.7 billion, followed by the EU at $25.5 billion, Switzerland at a surprising $22.8 billion, Mexico at $15.5 billion, and Canada at $11.3 billion. For Trump, these figures were red flags waving in his face, proof that America was bleeding cash to unfair partners. Enough's enough, he might have growled, eyeing the stats like a hawk sizing up its next meal. This tariff twist didn't come out of nowhere. It was baked into Trump's broader 2025 trade vision, unveiled in his January 20th America First Trade Policy memo. That blueprint dreamed big, a manufacturing economy with humming factories, fat paychecks, jobs galore, innovation buzzing, and a defense sector flexing muscle. The mission? Slash trade deficits, smack down unfair practices, and rewrite. Deals to put the U.S. on top. The reciprocal tariff policy fit like a glove, a shiny tool to hammer that agenda home. Meanwhile, the administration was poking at existing pacts like the USMCA, making sure they served the stars and stripes, and squinting at the WTO with a mix of skepticism and reformist zeal, its dispute system and rule-following habits under the microscope. But here's the rub. Dropping this policy amid active trade wars wasn't a peace offering, it was a double down on protectionism. Where past U.S. leaders might have pushed for freer trade to cool tensions, Trump leaned into the fray, escalating the stakes. His focus on bilateral deficits as the big bad wolf aligned with America first, but it risked kicking the legs out from under global trade frameworks like the WTO, which preached fairness through equal treatment, not mirror matches. In our small-town thread, Linda overheard the trade talk on the news while brewing her tariff tonic. Tense relations, huh? Sounds like Trump's picking fights instead of friends, she mused, stirring sugar into a cup. A nearby farmer nodded. Deficit with China's up? My corn's still down, thanks, trade wars. Across the border, a Canadian mill worker shrugged. More U.S. tariffs? Guess we'll keep the lumber. As April 2nd loomed, Trump's tariff tale was less a bridge builder and more a wall raiser, set against a backdrop of frayed TIs and bulging deficits. The world braced for impact, wondering if America first meant everyone else last, and Linda's coffee prices crept higher still. Chapter 8. Challenges and complexities in implementation from reciprocal tariff policy. Sounded snappy on paper, but rolling it out was like trying to herd cats blindfolded on a tightrope with a spreadsheet in one hand. The logistics alone were a beast. Tracking and matching tariffs across hundreds of countries and thousands of products was no Sunday picnic. One nation might tax apples at 5%, another at 20%, and don't even start on the widgets each rate, shifting like sand in a storm. The U.S. would need a system so slick it could juggle all that data without breaking a sweat, and even then, someone in Washington was probably muttering, we're going to need a bigger server. Then there were the non-tariff barriers and TTs, the sneaky cousins of taxes. Think subsidies, regulations, or that pesky VAT Trump kept eyeballing. Pinning a number on those was like nailing Jell-O to a wall, tricky and messy. The administration flagged VAT and digital service taxes as unfair, but turning those into equivalent tariffs? Good luck. Is a 20% VAT worth a 15% tariff or a 25% one? A trade analyst might groan, drowning in coffee and subjectivity. It was a puzzle with no clear picture, and every guess risked a fight. The red tape didn't stop there. Customs offices and businesses were staring down a paperwork avalanche, higher compliance costs, slower clearances, and a headache for anyone moving goods. Great, Linda might have sighed, picturing her coffee beans stuck in port. Now my tariff tonic's late and expensive, and figuring out where stuff came from. In today's global mashup, a phone might have parts from 10 countries good. Luck picking the origin for the right tariff. It'd take a detective, a magnifying glass, and a fat budget to sort that mess. Sneaky businesses added another twist. Higher tariffs could spark a Dodge Fest, fudging values, mislabeling origins, anything to slip past the taxman. Oh, this pricey gadget? Totally from tariff-free land. A shady importer might wink, undermining the whole plan. Enforcement would be a cat-and-mouse game. With customs agents playing whack-a-mole, the world wouldn't sit still either. Trade policies shift like the wind. Country A cuts tariffs, country B hikes them, and the U.S. would need to pirouette and sink too. Keep the reciprocal promise. Picture a frazzled USDR team, refreshing trade feeds 24/7, yelling, "Adjust the rates again." It'd be chaos, leaving businesses dizzy and guessing. And the kicker? This grand fairness fix could boomerang, jacking up U.S. consumer prices and stunting growth as Yale's 27003 400 household hit warned. Fairness is swell, a farmer might grumble, but my unsold wheat says otherwise. Legal tangles loom too. The WTO might squint at Trump's tariffs and cry foul. Q lawsuits and retaliation from miffed nations arguing. This breaks the rules. Plus, there was a quirky catch. By mirroring others' tariffs, the U.S. might hand foreign governments the reins to its tax rates. If China slaps a 50% fee on U.S. goods, America matches it, and suddenly Beijing's calling shots. Stateside. Wait, Linda might laugh. They're setting our prices now? As April 2nd neared, Trump's tariff dream faced a reality check. Logistics, loopholes, and legal snarls piling up like rush hour traffic. The Jenga tower wobbled, with every tweak risking a tumble. Linda, pouring her pricier brew, nailed it. Fair's fair, but this sounds like a hot mess, and I'm still out $6 a cup. The world watched, wondering if Trump's bold play would stick the landing or just leave everyone buried in paperwork and regret. Chapter 9. Conclusion and outlook. And so, on February 13, 2025, President Trump signed his reciprocal tariff policy into being, a bold stroke that flipped the script on America's trade tale. It was simple in theory: match whatever tariffs other countries slapped on U.S. goods, but oh, what a tangled web it wove. Trump pitched it as the ultimate fairness fix, a way to right the wrongs of a lopsided global game. But as the curtain rose on this new act, the stage was set for a drama packed with economic twists, international tantrums, and a hefty dose of what now? The economists didn't mince words. This wasn't a free ride. Prices for U.S. shoppers could climb. Think Linda's $6 tariff tonic turning into a $7 splurge, while GDP growth might limp, shedding 0.6 to 1.0 points by Yale's count. Jobs could vanish in industries caught in the crossfire, and tossing VAT and digital taxes into the mix only cranked the dial higher, with J.P. Morgan eyeing tariffs topping 20%. It was fairness with a catch. The bill landed square on American wallets. The world didn't send thank you notes either. China flexed its retaliatory muscles. Canada and Mexico cried foul, and the EU waved a warning finger. Retaliation was the word of the hour. Trade war whispered through the air, a specter that could leave everyone poorer. History offered a gentle nudge. Back in 1934, reciprocal tariffs meant talking down barriers, not building them up. Trump's 2025 remix? A protectionist pirouette, twirling away from that old dance. The U.S. trade scene was already a pressure cooker, $1.568 billion in deficits, spats with China, Canada, and Mexico simmering since January. Trump's America First memo from January 20th had set the tone. Beef up manufacturing, cut deficits, rewrite the rules. The reciprocal policy was the cherry on top, but it risked cracking the WTO's multilateral foundation, favoring bilateral brawls over global handshakes. Executing this grand plan, a logistical circus, tracking tariffs across countless countries and products, wrestling with TTs like VAT, and untangling global supply chains was a tall order. Customs groaned under paperwork, businesses dodged with sneaky tricks, and the WTO loomed with a legal frown. Fairness sounds nice, Linda quipped, but this is like chasing a greased pig with a calculator. As the April 2nd rollout loomed, the tale closed on a cliffhanger. Trump's tariff adventure promised seismic shifts. Some saw a stronger America, others a costlier mess. Globally, it was a coin toss, truce or turmoil. Linda, wiping her counter, summed it up. Fair's fair, they say, but I'm still pouring. Trouble, and it's not cheap. The world watched, wallets and wits at the ready, as Trump's bold bid unfolded a story of ambition, risk, and a whole lot of coffee-fueled uncertainty. And that's the end of our wild ride through Trump's 2025 reciprocal tariff adventure, a tale of trade, tariffs, and a little bit of chaos. From Linda's pricier tariff tonic to the global Jenga game of retaliation, we've explored how one policy turned the world upside down, all while picking up some English along the way. What do you think? Will Trump's fairness fight pay off, or just leave us all paying more? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this story-driven lesson, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button for more adventures in English. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story. Keep learning, keep smiling, and keep the coffee brewing.